I'm in need of a great big grin. I know where to go for some oxytocin when the whole world seems to be cold and mean. I know who to call for some dopamine. I'll be your Lucy, you'll be my Ethel, I'll be the Thelma, you'll be Louise, and we'll ride together till we reach the rainbow's end. Thank you for being my friend.
Welcome to Anatomy of Friendship. We are in season 2, and if you are listening to us or watching us anytime around real time, this is a couple days post-election. So it's yesterday was, go ahead.
No, 2 days ago was election.
2 days ago was the election. Yesterday was the post-election day
Results.
and results, and today we're just kind of finding our way, and we thought we would fumble our way through because neither of us are newscasters or people that are particularly politically oriented, even though we both have very strong opinions and strong feelings and strong values. And but we just thought we would share a little bit about how we're finding our way through and hoping it will be of value to you, whether you're listening around the election or just getting through any kind of a heartbreak, any kind of disappointment, because that is the stuff of life. Things don't always go our way. So how do we get through when it's particularly hard? Joe, do you want to dive in, like what your journey was yesterday and how you're finding your way today?
I was so nervous to do this podcast.
Mhm.
And with all of the technical difficulties we had that took almost an hour for us to get
So
through
many
today, to
difficulties. Yeah.
even do it, I was like, we're not supposed to do this podcast. So,
But we're friggin' doing it anyway because you never
yeah, well,
know.
I
Something
mean,
good
and I
happens.
so appreciated that we did a prayer before we started because we want to anchor ourselves
Hmm.
uh in the like aligning ourselves with the highest form of faith that we could possibly align ourselves with. We're not poor sports. We believe that life has a flow of its own. We talk about the river of life, being here long before we ever got here, and that it will continue long after we are ever here.
Oh.
And that, Einstein declared that this was a friendly universe. Um, and all of your books and my books and everything that we talk about is really based around turning, for you, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
Turning the tragic into magic.
Turning the tragic into magic. And I'm not even calling it tragic at this moment, even though I know that's the subtitle to your book.
Hmm.
But just talking about that one parable about the man. Right. And I think we probably talked about it in
About
other
the
podcasts
farmer.
about, yeah, well, yeah,
Oh.
I'm not sure. It's funny because I just reread this story recently and there's so many versions of it, but the man who had the horses and they ran away and everyone said that they were, it's terrible that they ran away. And he's like, we don't know it's terrible. We just know that they ran away and then they came back. And oh, it's so great that they came back. No, we don't know if it's great that they came back. I just know I have a bunch of horses. And oh, my son was trying to break one of the wild Mustangs and he broke his leg. Oh, it's terrible. He broke his leg. No, we don't don't know if it's terrible. He broke his leg. We only know he broke his leg. And, you know, like just like on and on and on, that people want to
Exactly.
declare things that are happening as negative and bad and wrong. And yet they are a part of this flow of life that we can't possibly understand. And for those of you who don't know the end of the story, there is no end of the story, because
People
the
think it's the
guy,
shittiest story ever because
right?
there's
Because,
no punchline,
right,
but that is the punchline. There is no good
right,
or
right,
bad. It's
right.
all
There's
just
no
what
good.
is.
Just what is, exactly. And we don't know that this one thing didn't lead to another thing. And
Right.
so, you know, I think it's been really important to me lately to, as quickly as possible, like give myself a spiritual adjustment to accept what is as fast as possible. And that includes my railing against what is. That includes my sucker punch in the gut when I heard what the results were. That includes my fear of having, even speaking in a podcast and having certain people that know me or don't know me
Mhm.
not be happy that, you know, I live in one of the very few blue states in our United States, and that I'm very blue. And I feel very blue, by the way.
Yeah.
We were gonna talk about calling this podcast, you know, something about
Post-election
being, yeah,
blues.
blues, exactly, and being blue. And I thought it was so sweet of you. And you know, and not knowing who I can talk to about how I feel, because I never know who's blue and who's not blue. And I'm not blue, I'm purple.
Yeah.
Like, I'm purple. I'm not this or that. I don't want to be in this, and I will let you talk soon, but I wanted to just let myself have a moment to
Yeah.
not know what I was going to say and have things come out as authentically as possible. But I think that living in a dualistic society doesn't mean I have to identify with dualism. I am a oneness kind of gal. And
Hmm.
yet we are on a planet with black and white and moon and sun and morning and night and birth and death and all these extremes. And yet identifying with spirit, the way I like to identify with spirit, there's only one life. There's only one life. And there are every crayon color in the spectrum of life that is in every human being and that is inside of all of our perspectives. And so I want to be careful not to identify as blue and red. I want to be careful that I identify as what my values are. And like the, you know, the AI moment I had with my mom, where we sat down with our opposing views and we used AI to try to determine what actually are our values, not what's rhetoric, not what's blue and red, not what's Fox and CNN, but what are our values and what information is feeding those values. And so I feel like if I can connect with people on values, then I can connect. And connection is what's important to me. Now, it's also important to me that I live in a safe world, and I, you know, have some fears about that. But I'm going to stop my rant now, and I'm going to hand it back to you. And I'm going to ask you, how are you doing post-election results? What's on your heart? And let's just open your heart and see what it has to say.
So many things, but I want to say really quick, I shared your story with my
My
mom,
AI story.
your AI story about your
Hmm.
mom and how, and if people haven't heard that, it was the most recent episode we had. I believe that the most recent one we posted, but it's one of the first few in season 2. Anyway, I shared about what you did with my mom after my mom got into a screaming bloodbath argument with one of my sisters, not the one that we normally think of, but my other one, who she's definitely not blue, the opposite of blue. And they locked horns the day before the election, or a couple days before the election. And my mom is a pacifist. My mom is the kindest, softest, gentlest soul on the planet. So for her to completely lose it, screaming and yelling, I hate him. Like, ah! she, and I said, well, and I talked to her later. I said, did you mend that? And she said, no, there's nothing I can say to her. And I just told her your story about you and your mom. And she was like, oh my God. So the pieces that stood out were that you said, I know that you care about people and that your values are for kindness and for goodness on this planet. And that's what I know to be true about you. And I believe that's what you know to be true about me. And we just have different sources, different algorithms that are giving us information. But I'm going to land on you care about people, and I hope you land on I care about people. And she also really loved that you used AI to give you unbiased opinion, unbiased information based on based on whatever was going on both sides with citations. So that was an amazing thing. And my mom said, oh my God, I'm going to try that. Oh my God, I'm going to do that. So she shared that with sister of mine, and they had a forgiveness conversation. And I don't know that that would have happened had that not happened with you and your mom. So I hadn't even told you that.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That is so amazing.
I
I
know.
just,
Yeah.
I just posted that story that I wrote about AI with my
Mm.
mom on my website. I didn't put it on Medium yet, but I put it on my website on my blog site. Um,
Loveyourwaytohealth.com
right.
forward
At Love Your
slash
Way to Health.
blog.
Yeah, just go to my blog. It'll be
Right.
there.
Uh-huh.
On
It's a great
loveyourwaytohealth.com.
article.
Yeah, I mean it's a short article because I was trying to, get it in New York Times, but it because it could use more fleshing out. I
Oh,
think it would be
yeah. But it's
lovely if it
nice.
had, yeah, it's nice and succinct,
Mhm.
but it does talk about the idea of using AI and knowing AI
Right.
isn't perfect and everything. But thank you for telling me that. That really warmed my heart. That really warmed my heart. And I got to send the article to your mom.
Yes, you do. But I
Well,
think it's
actually, she already got the point. It doesn't
she
matter.
got the point. But I think it's yeah. Okay, so yesterday I found myself aware of it almost felt like I was in a fog and I was around surrounded by a fog bank, and I was deliberately trying to not just fall into the fog bank, and it felt like it would have been the easiest thing to do to just fall into it. I had a podcast for my own show yesterday, and I was thinking I need to cancel this. What was I thinking scheduling a show for the election day results? Like, this is ridiculous. It was a show. A guy wrote a book called The Intuition Bible. His name's Happy Ollie. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is not going to go. But I decided to keep it. And it ended up being really good because I had to kind of pull myself up out of the relative funk and be in a space like where you and I are in right now, where it's kind of like, let's look for solutions. I'm not just going to give into the kind of the malaise and the horror, and let's see if there's some solutions. His book is called The Intuition Bible. There's got to be something here that would be a solution. And he actually had a lot of really good things to say that were borderline controversial, but I think most people will appreciate them. The basic idea was he was saying that from an intuitive perspective, you you have to develop a really powerful inner world that sort of makes the outer world less important. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but your inner world is what determines your experience more often than not and most of the time. And he was saying how he's definitely a blue Democrat all the way, but he said the worst, if he was to think of the worst time in his life, it was during the Obama period, because it was when his son and best friend were killed in a car accident. Darkest time of his life. And Obama happened to be president, and that was a happy thing. He liked having Obama president. And then he said if he thought about the best time of his life, it was during Trump's last reign, because that was when he adopted two twins during that time. And so he was saying, of course, it matters who's sits in the Oval Office, but most of what determines our life is what we do. and I loved that frame. And then he was sharing with me, I shared this with you, he's from Iran, where for a very long period of time as a kid he couldn't even go outside during the reign of the Ayatollah. And there was, so he's like, you know, what we're dealing with here, relatively speaking, no matter how bad it gets, it's pretty Disneyland. It's Disneyland. And it just was an interesting frame. He was the perfect person to talk to. So kind of I got out of my funk and in a pretty positive place. And then towards the end of the day, I had the brilliant idea to watch the new Anna Kendrick movie called Woman of the Hour, which I'm glad I watched now, but when it was happening, I thought this is the worst idea ever. So what you get from the preview is that it's a true story based on the capturing of a serial killer that had the audacity to show up on the dating game. And the Anna Kendrick character is the bachelorette, and she picks him to be the bachelor. And so it's this true story. But basically, what it opened up, because it took place in the late 70s, it brought back to me so much of my upbringing, because I grew up, I was a teenager. Oh, how old was I? I was like, like, so I was born in 68. So in the like 78, I was 10, 11, 12. And it just brought back to me the misogyny that I grew up in, the men that would grope, the men that thought they, you know, I see you, I pluck you, I take you. And it brought back a memory that I haven't thought of, I don't know, in a long time. So it was right like circa this time. So the movie is about a serial killer rapist. He rapes and murders his victims. Around the corner from my house, my babysitter, who lived, you know, a block away, was at a bar that was near our house, and she got raped between where the bar was and our house. And I'm going to do a little spoiler alert. In the movie, the way the killer gets caught, sorry, spoiler alert, is the one of his victims, after he almost kills her, after he rapes her and left her for dead, basically thought she was dead, she didn't die, and she says to him, please promise me you won't tell anybody about what happened. I just know how people judge, and I just would really like people to not know what just happened. And can we just go back to your place? And it's so tweaked the dude, because normally everybody sees him as a monster, and he's afraid they're gonna say something about what happened. So it was like she completely flipped it on him, and she ends up buying time and getting away and getting to call the police. So this babysitter of mine did that after she got raped, and who knows what else was happening, I don't know, but she told the man, I know a place we can go, like to have more, you know, one, like to have more of this. And he's like surprised. And she takes him to my house. So I'm about 10 years old, and this is about 3 o'clock in the morning. I hear a knock at the door, a loud knock, and my mom and dad happen to be up in the middle of the night. Like that never happened. My dad opens the front door. She comes screaming in through the front door, screaming, yelling, crying. And then my dad runs out chasing him in his underwear, running down the street, and the guy got away. But all I know is I'm 10 years old, and I hear a knock, and then I hear screaming, and I think it's my mom. And in my mind, I'm picturing somebody's killing my mom. And I'm under my bed, just frozen for about an hour. I don't know how long I was under there, but so I can remember being under my bed and hearing all this screaming and crying. And eventually I remember hiding behind the door, and then and then eventually creeping out into the hallway and looking out and not seeing any man, but just seeing this babysitter. Her name was Paris. Anyway, it brought it brought all that back, and how, like, that was kind of, I mean, it wasn't normal to rape somebody, although I don't know. It was, so I felt like I took a deep dive into a very dark place of what it was like to be young and to be at the effect of just being treated as an object, and it just made me feel enraged. That it made me feel the rage that I hadn't felt all day, that somebody that gropes and is proud of the groping, that felt like a product of the 1970s, that feels like a 70s man in modern times that's getting away with what he's doing. And of course, there's two sides to every story, of course, blah, blah, blah. But that's how I felt. And so I let myself cry. I let myself go dark. In my Enneagram, I'm a 3. And 3s have a hard time letting themselves feel anything. And when it came up, I just myself just, I let myself go. And I felt like that was progress for me, as opposed to just kind of sublimating. Anyway, by the time I woke up, actually in the middle of the night last night, I was having some really horrible nightmares. And I got up and I journaled and journaled and journaled and got it all out at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I had this little epiphany about something I wanted to write. And I ended up popping through it and coming into a place of creativity. And I want to share this little text that I got from someone. I'm going to find it. And here it is. That says basically what I'd like to land on for this moment. This is from Toni Morrison. This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. Actually, I don't completely agree with that. But I mean, I think there is room for it. And then we speak, we write, and that's how civilization heals. So I like that. I like that I had an idea for something creative that came out of nowhere. And I feel like, okay, I've got something to do. So yeah, that was my journey yesterday.
Oh
What is
my
that bringing
God.
up for you?
I'm actually in my Kindle right now searching for the name of the title of the chapter that you wrote about the the dogs biting your arm. What was the name of that?
The right to bite? No, 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 that's a different one. Um,
Uh, yeah.
I could tell you
Uh, yeah.
the, I don't know. Oh, when the dog bit my
Were they
arm,
yeah, were they the bull mastiffs? Were they bull
they were the bull
mastiffs?
mastiffs.
Okay.
Ah, bite me.
Bite me. Okay. Yeah, it's an amazing,
Chapter
I'm
6.
just, for anyone who hasn't read Kelly's book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I mean, I helped edit this book chapter by chapter,
Oh my
and
God.
yet I'm reading it again. I'm reading it again, and I feel like I was just telling you earlier in a message, and I'm going to say it for the listeners, that I'm Jewish, and which actually scares me.
Ah,
Actually scares me to be Jewish right now. It scares me to be a woman right now. It scares me to be gay right now. Um, 3 strikes. In this political environment, I feel some fear about that.
mm,
But in the Jewish I don't want to say religion, but a lot of people, what they do is they read a portion of the Torah or a portion of the Old Testament. And there's 52 portions matching the 52 weeks of the year. And every time you get to the end of the Old Testament, day one starts again and you start the same reading over and over again. And yet, what they say is that by the time you did that whole journey through the Torah, by the time you get back to the beginning again to start over, you're not the same person that was on the journey the last time you read that same chapter, that same portion. And so I feel that way with your book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I feel like it's an amazing map of how to take tragedy and crises and pain and difficulty and not just get through it, but be a better person as a function of it. And the map of the way you look at yourself in the mirror and you really mine the responsibility of your perspective of a situation is exquisite. This is not ordinary thinking. And this is why you are one of my favorite people on the whole entire planet, because I don't know very many people who are willing to look at themselves like they are every character in their dream, every Jungian character in a story, that you would look. The reason I mentioned this, and there's like 10 things I want to say at once. The reason I mentioned your book and the story Bite Me was because you were talking about yourself as an Enneagram 3 and how hard it is for you to have feelings. And that day you decided not to squelch yourself and Pollyanna yourself, but you actually decided to let yourself have a bunch of feelings and let it out of you the way animals do, the way you and I learned from that beautiful angel monk, David. That we have to let ourselves have our feelings. And animals, when they get triggered and traumatized, their bodies shake and shake and shake. And it's the way that they toss their trauma out through their nerve pathways. And, how many ways as a woman did you internalize the idea that you shouldn't have any feelings but positive ones?
Right.
And
Right.
and to quickly transform. And by the way, I have a version of this myself, even though of the two of us, I am darker than you generally. Generally speaking, on a daily basis, I go darker than you. That doesn't mean you don't go dark, because I know
Right.
you got dark, but I have a tendency to go darker more obviously. But I also have a part of me that has tried to learn to see the unjust, the unfair, the violence in my life, the violence I grew up with. I had a way that I would, and you've heard me say this, push it off the screen of my awareness and focus on what's good and right. And I was
Right.
like Lucy from the Peanuts, like psychiatry 5 cents. Like I had all these great ways that I could define the people in my life and their strange behavior in a psychological way so as to understand them with my incredible empathy.
Right.
And with that empathy, I forgot to do what Marianne Williamson used to say, which is, tithing isn't tithing unless there's enough for yourself. Compassion isn't compassion unless there's enough for yourself. I used to have a ton of compassion and understanding for others while simultaneously shoving my own pain down. And it's taken me all these years to begin to acknowledge my own feelings and have some understanding for another person's feelings while not necessarily, obliterating my truth. And so I'm coming around to the circle, which is I was so happy to hear that you let yourself have your feelings. I mean, in our goddess group, our women's circle, someone posted, who was it that posted the picture
I
of
did.
you
The
did.
Statue
Okay.
of Liberty
Statue of
crying.
Liberty crying with her hands
I
over her
got that from
face.
Susie Plaxon, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Susie. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was a great representation of
Yeah.
how many ways our country has made some really painful decisions that have affected so many people. And so anyway, I talked about your book. I talked about your story, Bite Me. because of how many of us want to see the bright side. You and I were talking about me trying to have positivity bias, but then you looked it up and it was really more of an extreme version of
Mhm.
like negativity bias is all the way negative. Positivity bias is like, sitting on a sugar coated shit cake. And so I came up with a new idea of gratitude bias. So
Yeah.
I'd like us to talk about that, but I've been talking for
Yeah.
quite a while and I didn't know what I was going to say and all that popped out of my mouth. So if you've got some notes and something coming up, let's talk about what you've got coming up and then we'll ping pong back to me. What's
I
coming up for
love the
you?
gratitude bias. It feels like it's a muscle to work because it does alter our lens. I mean, there's I don't know that there's any quicker way to shift things than to do that. And I appreciate everything you said about my book and my stories. It's and in this, as I'm learning about Enneagram, I'm finding that, yeah, it's exactly the opposite of what an Enneagram 3 is geared to do, is to not be transparent about deficits and to not be emotional and to not be vulnerable. And yet that's what this project was for me. So it's like, in order to grow, I needed to lean on those things. And I still do. I still need to. But I feel like it takes in order to look at the heavy things, actually, I have to, at least for my particular Enneagram style, I have to have some basis, some toehold on my spiritual connection to God. Like, in other words, a bigger picture for reality. And there, that story about the farmer, and there is no good, there is no bad, there, it's just what is. I lean on those stories. And then, in order to look at the darkness, I feel like I need to have a plan so that I don't get lost there, because I have come close to getting lost in the past. There's been like 3 or 4 times in my life that I just thought I didn't want to be on the planet because I went so far. So, in order to prevent that, in order for me to look at the big picture, and that includes the darkness, I need to have a toehold in some kind of faith that is bigger than what's going on in the ups and downs of the human condition, but also having an alchemy formula. And I do lean on OGLE. And that was the first thing I did. I sat on the porch with Dana yesterday. We had our coffee and I grabbed my journal and I started ogling. And I wrote about, and I was ogling our president, who, well, he's not our president yet,
President
but
elect.
a
Yeah.
president elect. And without going into everything I ogled, well, I don't know if I should or not, but let's just say here's a few adjectives. People are gonna, maybe they'll
That you
hate me with this,
that you find
that I
offensive.
described, that I found offensive. Um,
And
Unfairness.
just in case anyone is fresh to listening, OGLE is an acronym that Kelly came up with that's in her book. And so you'll just, as you give us each of the
Yeah,
acronyms, you'll give us the quickie.
yeah.
Okay.
So the O is for what's offensive. And this is permission to rant and rave and be a victim. And so what I noticed was most offensive was the unfairness. This person, according to my judgment, is a criminal and is misogynist and is a thief and steals and gets away with shit again and again and again,
And
and
lies.
lies. And so it offends my sense of fairness. It offends my sense of justice. And it also feels like this younger, more human part of me that sees things in a much smaller frame. This can't possibly be the way this movie ends. Like, the movie's supposed to end where the good guy wins. It can't. So it just tells me this isn't the end. Life is long. Okay. But I did the what's good about it, and I couldn't really find, first of all, what's good about lying, stealing, cheating, misogyny. But what I found was good was, in spite of that, I'm still breathing. In spite of all that, the planets are still spinning around. The universe is still, the sun is still out. Like, life is going on after what feels like a horror show. I'm drinking my coffee. I'm here with my husband. Like, there's all this good. And oh, we do have enough of a democracy that no matter who's president, it's a capped period of time. So, okay, that's
Mm,
good. I mean, hopefully, yeah,
hopefully. Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
Um, and the fact that I have the freedom to express that I don't like it
Right.
to
On a
a
podcast
relative
right
degree.
now, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I can say, I mean, that's a big deal.
Hmm.
So,
This isn't Russia back in the day
or
where they weren't even
today,
allowed to have, or today,
yeah.
where all their, go ahead. You're
So
ogling.
where I
Sorry.
got where the magic always comes in is in the looking glass. So this is what the L stands for. The O is for what's offensive, the G is for what's good about it, the L is for the looking glass. And the looking glass is, where do I see myself or those qualities in me? And have I ever lied? Yep. Have I ever cheated? Yep. Have I ever stolen? Yep. Have I been misogynistic? Yes. Oh my God. So, oh my God, the worst
Even against yourself.
against myself. Oh
Right.
my God, yes. And I thought, okay, well, what was happening to me when I did all of those things? And what from the best that I could surmise is, I talked about this on my podcast and my guest corrected me. I said, I didn't feel connected. I wasn't connected to God during those times. And he said, no, you were always connected. And I'm like, okay, yes, I was always connected. All of us are always connected. Everyone's connected to God, but not with a conscious connection. I wasn't consciously connected to the oneness, I wasn't consciously in a thy will be done. I was in a my will be done. I was not, during those times that I was the most aberrant, I wasn't thinking that there was a bigger picture. I wasn't thinking about other people. I wasn't even seeing other people. I wasn't seeing the big picture ramifications of my behavior at all. It was just, I see it, I want it, I get it. Period. That's how it has to be, because that's the only way. And there was no faith, no thought about a higher power. So that brings me, so first of all, as hard of a truth as that is to swallow, that I'm capable of being awful, that it's also simultaneously where the blessing comes in, because the pain in my heart is around separation, either oring, and me versus you, or me versus them, or me versus him. And even though I don't want to be in a unified field with something so disgusting, when I'm in separation, that's when I suffer. So there was something about just finding myself in the looking glass of what I didn't like that put me back into some form of unity. And also, that leads me to the E in OGLE. This is what I can elevate in myself. I need to raise
Before you,
my, yeah,
before
go.
you do your E, let me just say
Yeah.
this. What was your guest's name again? Because I keep wanting to talk
Happy
about him.
Ollie,
Happy.
HAPPYALI.
Okay.
He
So
wrote the
one of the
Intuition
things,
Bible.
okay, one of the things you said that he said was, you may not have been connected to God, but God was always connected to you. So I
He
just wanted
just,
to say
yeah,
that you said that, that he
yeah,
said that, and that was really genius.
yeah.
And do elevate now. Sorry.
So yeah, it was just, well, then to me, if I am a better person, if I'm the kind of person that I like, and I'm the kind of, like, the only way around it, or the simple way around it, is I need to up my game with regards to being more spiritually connected, is to be more in that unified field, to meditate more deeply, to meditate more often, and to remember that, and to seek more of that when I have a moment of feeling like it's me against the world, to remember, no, it's not. Like, pause, redirect, take a breath, do a prayer. Oh yeah. Like, course correct. So it gave me back my power, because it gave me something to do. And I have a long ways to go. I mean, I love that I have a connection to what I call God, or good orderly direction, or the love of this universe. But I feel like that there's no lid on how far I can go with that. And that's, the better I am at that, the more I feel like I can walk my talk and do what JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Instead of what do I want my president to do for me? It's like, this is what I can do. I can be the change I want to see in the world. And that was from Gandhi. Okay, back to you, Beth.
So, first thing is, I really want to acknowledge what is so second nature to us both that I don't think is that natural in the world. And I don't want to skip over
Mm-hmm.
what an incredible modeling it is. I mean, we've had this talk before. I remember you were on Fox News and they were interviewing you and you were talking about how we are all of it. You were talking about how, that thing that we think is the most atrocious to some tiny grain, we are that.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, I'm not a murderer and I'm not this and I'm not that. But have you ever murdered parts of yourself? Have you ever raped parts of yourself? Have you ever,
Mm-hmm.
shoved a part of yourself underwater and shut it up? Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever stolen from yourself? Have you ever, right? Like there are all these adjectives that we talk about
Yeah.
that define the things we find most reprehensible. And there's nothing in us that isn't part of the whole. And so every dark and every light from every walk of the spectrum is inside of us, however minuscule. And so this is a belief that you and I have. So I just want to say that it's so brave of you to break down what you find offensive about our current president-elect and to see those aspects of yourself. One of the things that I appreciate about you that you didn't talk about in your What's Good About This is how some of these more aberrant protective mechanisms that we have are often a function of
Mm-hmm.
a ego on fumes attempting to find its right to life, and
Yeah.
that there's something good
Thank you.
about there's
Mm-hmm.
something good about um fighting for your life, even if you're murdering, stealing, raping, trying to get what that thing is that you want, that there's some part of the ego that thinks it's worthy of fighting for something, however aberrant. So we're not condoning those things. We're just looking for what is good about all the strange behaviors that happen in our world. So I want to bring this to a struggle that I'm having right now with someone in my life who is using drugs. And this someone is calling me delusional and telling me that I am, just like blaming me for all these things that I am with a vicious attack. And it feels very Trump-like to me, if I
Yeah.
could use Trump as an adjective for that thing that lies, cheats, and steals and alters facts and just thinks if he could just repeat it a whole bunch of times, that somehow it makes it true.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at this person in my life and I'm thinking this person is in a great deal of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this person is probably, when he truly looks in the mirror, has also got a great deal of shame. And his power, his attempt to draw upon some modicum of feeling worthy of being on this planet is to deflect an attack. And that is a version of self-esteem. However aberrant as it is, and I learned this from you, like the fight for all that attack is a fight for having the right to live and having some form of dignity. It's aberrant, yes, but it's something that's good about our, and I'm using the word our, not his and mine or theirs and ours, but our protective mechanisms that were born usually at times, prefrontal lobe being fully formed, and before we had a sense of what those interpretations were going to do to our lives, or those beliefs that we had in our lives, we have these survival mechanisms that are yucky. Not a one of us has a beautiful shadow. If it was a beautiful light shadow, it wouldn't be a shadow. However, shadows are only cast on something that exists. And shadows are necessary to show us when we're in the light and when we're not. And so I think it's important in the big scheme of life that huge productions are happening in life that are providing us contrast so that we can understand what light is. Sometimes we don't know what light is unless we have darkness. Which brings me to something else I want to talk about, which
Mm-hmm.
is what Happy said about living in Iran at the time of the Ayatollah, and how we don't know. This country doesn't really know the extremities of dictatorship or or yeah, or the kind of oppression that is possible. And having said that, I think it's very interesting to me that I used to be more of a conspiracy theorist. I used to be the one that's like, medicine is, doctors don't care about you. They only care about pushing drugs. They don't care about the depth of what's really happening on a holistic level. They only care about
Making
the
money.
symptoms,
Right.
making money. Yeah, like these extreme statements. This country sucks. This country's got liars and cheaters in our political system, and you can't trust. And like I was one of those people. I was brought up that way,
Mm-hmm.
like a like someone who was in a cult. I have
Mm-hmm.
had to be debriefed over many, 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 many years. And I am not interested in black and whiting things. There is good in dark people. There is darkness in quote unquote good people. We are made of all of it. And what is this rant about? This rant is about that I used to be one of those people. And
Mm-hmm.
then those people, I just use the word those, that kind of person, that kind of personality that was inside of me has turned into a very extreme version that has become this like MAGA. I want to say MAGA, but I know people say MAGA, this MAGA type personality, uh, which shocks me because a lot of those people that I used to be connected to were like holistic health people, and they were naturopaths, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
don't use fluoride, and, and don't get vaccination. But, my own son isn't vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
My own son. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an anti-vaxxer. I had a kid who had a compromised immune system, and I was in the alternative medicine world, and still am. Um, but I'm COVID vaccinated. My son is COVID vaccinated. I always said to my son, if there is something that is deadly that could kill you or other people, will get you vaccinated. But I wasn't going to give him a bunch of vaccinations based on things that were already mostly eradicated, which some of which are coming back. But in any case, why am I saying all this? Because I was one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've become more educated. I think it's really important that we
Mm-hmm.
don't just repeat things that we've heard and
Mm-hmm.
get on a bandwagon. It's like gossip.
Mm-hmm.
Rhetoric is like gossip. Just because somebody said something doesn't make it true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to say I feel really sad
Mm-hmm.
that so many of us that were like caring about people, had a value for caring about people, and had a value for caring about that people shouldn't get vaccinated and have them be injured by vaccines, or that people um, should go to a doctor and they should care about what we eat also, and what our environment is like, and should. Everybody is doing, I think, the best that they can. And I think that when I think about what Happy said about Iran, and I think about where I came from in this country, and I think about how easy it is to just focus on what sucks and what isn't good and how unfair. And
Mm-hmm.
like we live in an
Mm.
incredibly lucky country. This
Yeah.
country is incredibly lucky. People
Yeah.
throw out things like, oh, it's so much better in this country and so much better in that country. Well, have you lived in that country? And have you been to that country? And have
Mm-hmm.
you been to third world countries? And in
Mm-hmm.
those comparisons,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any sense of how fortunate we are on this planet, and how important it is that we don't just take the negative things said and ride on those things, but we do our research and that we look at the facts. People, I just want to say in because recently somebody sent me, pardon me for this rant. I know it's going in a lot of different
No, it's
directions.
awesome. It's awesome.
Okay. But recently somebody sent me something that was like, you take your dog to the vet, and the vet says, hey, what are you feeding your dog? What you feed your dog has a lot to do with their health. But then you go to a doctor, and the doctor's like, here, have a pill. And I didn't want to ride on that bandwagon. I am grateful for our medical community. I am unbelievably grateful. I had brain surgery in the middle of COVID, and
Mm,
I was treated by the most loving human beings who were overtaxed and overworked that actually
yeah.
care about human beings. And they're doing the best they can. And I used to be one of those people who didn't even take a Motrin. And now I'm like, you know what? Western medicine has important things. Eastern medicine has important things. It's important to be gray about stuff and not just throw out extremities. It's dangerous to be that way. It's dangerous for us to repeat rhetoric and not do our fact checking and really do like peer reviewed fact checking. And are all peer reviewed papers honest? Can there be skewed? Can they
Hmm.
be skewed? Of course they can. But honestly, intelligence checks sources. It just doesn't repeat whatever just because we heard it. And that's the lazy man's way of having some power over our world, is just to repeat what you hear. And I have repeated things dangerously, and I've been wrong. And so I am trying to be way more careful here. And I will be done with my rant now. I think
That was a
I
beautiful
hope I
rant.
hope that made some sense. I said a lot of things, and I felt like I needed to just kind of vomit. I need to
Well,
hurl before I can make some pearls. So
right, hurls to pearls. Well, one thing I love, I mean, I love everything and I agree with everything you said. It just feels like you and I mean, if our neural pathways are becoming, as we get on in life, they're becoming more narrow in certain areas, like of all the many options of the ways to be as possibilities of being human, we start taking a ride on certain pathways. And the more we ride it, the deeper it gets. And I feel like you and I are riding this wavelength of introspection and looking at ourselves and not just casting stones, but really taking it internally. And I like that. I like that it's becoming that's one of those super highways that it's like a neural pathway that's really strong, as well as the the gratitude, the blissipline, as Reverend Michael would call it, or the gratitude bias, to look at things, to not like the A Course in Miracles. I think about that on a day, on a days like this. One of the quotes I love is, look at the crucifixion but dwell not on it. And so to me that tells me, acknowledge it, and of course feel. For an Enneagram 3 person that's trying to grow, feel whatever does come up, but also don't get lost in it and don't become a part of the problem because I'm so lost in it. And to not look at the problem as something outside of myself. As a dream person, I feel like it's just part of the territory to look at it internally and to say, how is this me? What can I do? And then also do something in the physical world. I mean, I was proud of myself this election cycle. I did something I never did before. I was part of the phone banks, and I talking to undecided voters in Arizona and in Nevada. And that was such a stretch for me. That was totally out of my comfort zone. But it was like, okay, I did something physical that was beyond the scope of my normal comfort zone. But then the rest of it is internal. So I don't feel like we have to live in a state of abject hopelessness and helplessness, because there's a lot we can do individually on an individual level. Become the country, become the president of our own inner country that we want to see, and look at whatever triggers us externally and do the alchemy work inside. So I know we need to wrap this baby up with a bow, and I could see you're percolating with something. So you wrap it up.
Okay, so thank you for saying all that. It was so beautiful. And I just want to echo something that you said and anchor it. I have been making a concerted effort to meditate morning and night every day now, every single day. I feel like if I don't
Hmm.
tether myself
Hmm.
with a meditation sandwich, that I can get really lost in fear. And when I meditate, I feel like I tap into that river of life that was here before me and will be here after me. Me being this
Yes.
physical form. And to really exercise the muscles of faith so that I'm not calling something bad or good, but I'm seeing what is in front of me and doing what I'm called to do. And I can't always hear what I'm called to do if my mind is online and my heart and my spirit aren't online. So I'm
Ooh,
trying to get my
nice.
spirit online so that that becomes, I call it my royal self, like contact my royal self and find out what my orders are from my royal self. That is the part of me that if anybody's listening, you can create that, what that looks like inside of you, some benevolent part of you that is not subject to life or death, the observer that is the one watching the life, not the one who's in a physical body that is afraid of dying. My royal
Right.
self has never been born and can never die, as the first law of thermodynamics states. It is eternal. And so it doesn't come from fear. It comes from objectivity. And so when I go into prayer about what do I do? What do I do about someone that's attacking me? Do I respond or do I wait? Do I come from adrenaline or do I take a breath and go into meditation and ask my higher self, my royal self, what would you have me do? And that includes nothing. That includes waiting, because waiting is a part of muffins baking in the oven. You don't just put them in and pull them out. They have to bake. And sometimes there's ingredients that are necessary, and that ingredient is time. And so if I
Nice.
allow for my higher self to tell me what's next or to tell me to wait, that I actually give my allegiance to that internal president. That's the president that matters to me. That tells me I'm in alignment with this river of life and I'm doing my part. So thank you for letting us have this amazing and kind of scary, but necessary Hurls to Pearls moment. I am so grateful to hold hands with you.
Thank you. And until we all meet again, thank you
Thanks for
being
our
our
friend.
Thank you for joining us on Anatomy of Friendship.
If this has been helpful to you, or if you have questions or comments,
Please share them with us at anatomyoffriendship.com.
if you haven't yet, take a moment to follow, like, and subscribe to our show.
And don't forget to share it with a friend or two or a few.
Special shout out to Dana Walden at Love Hub Productions for being our engineer, producer, and for writing our friendship song.
And Karina Grandma for being the voice of our song. Take it away, Karina.
Baby,